Hi, everybody. Welcome to NewsNite for Friday, May 27th. What's been a stormy week, especially for some of our local communities. We'll talk about the storms, the impact, and whether a siren should be brought into the city of Akron. We're also talking a summer of politics, and are there really wolves and coyotes somewhere near the Akron Zoo? Those stories and more next on NewsNite. We're all thinking summer, but many are also thinking politics. Big political races loom for the fall. Earlier this week, Jody had a chance to sit down with Dr. Jon Greene from the Bliss Institute. Among the many topics they discussed, the pending mayoral primary in Akron.
I think it's going to be a very close and hard-fought primary campaign. The mayor has, by almost everybody's estimation, a distinguished record of achievement here in the city. But one of the things that happens when one has been in office for a long time and done a lot of things is there accumulates a certain amount of criticism. And so there are people who would like to see a change in City Hall. And both candidates, both campaigns, have hired some very good people to work for them. It looks like they're both going to be well funded. So I think this is going to be a very, very close race. And in a lot of ways, it's going to be not just about the past here in Akron, but about the future and what's going to happen down the road.
Is this the most challenging race that the mayor has faced in a long time?
I think it really is. I think that in Mike Williams there is a worthy opponent, someone who's won citywide and is really pretty well known, comes from a family with a good name in Akron politics. Of course, Mayor Pasqualic is very well known as well and has, as I indicated, a distinguished record. So I think this is going to be a very hard-fought primary. Akron has become such a democratic city, as most large cities in Ohio have become, that really the most important election is the primary. So that's where I think the focus will be.
You mentioned that both campaigns have brought on some pretty heavy-handed and heavy hitters for campaign strategy. Jerry Austin for Mike Williams' campaign and Jeff Rusnick, I think it is, for Mayor Pasqualic's campaign. How do you think they will impact the strategy of both campaigns?
Well, I think these are very talented political operatives, campaign consultants who've been involved in a lot of different races and bring a huge amount of experience. And I think really where their experience will be seen is in the day-to-day operations of the campaigns. I expect these to be very well-run, effective campaigns, but also in the messaging. And we've already seen in some of the early accounts, you know, the Mayor Pasqualic's really running on his record, proven leadership. His opponent, Councilman Williams, is running on "it's time for change" or "it's time," and so that I think that will give the voters some choices that they really haven't had in the past because, as you indicated, Mayor Pasqualic hasn't faced a strong challenge for quite some time.
Certain to be the topic of the summer in local politics. Here to talk about these stories and more, we welcome Steve Hoffman from the Akron Beacon Journal. And always great to have freelance contributor and journalist Jon Miller here with us this week. And Jody, you had the chance to sit down with Dr. Greene. This race is going to have a lot of people talking, but he mentions the surrogates and the people behind the races, saying it's going to be pretty tight.
Well, it is going to be very tight, and I think just the fact that both campaigns brought on these high-powered political strategists prove that. If they had not, gotten the Stan Austin and the Jeff Rusnick, I think we could have sat back and said, oh well, it's just going to be a typical campaign. There's a lot at stake here. And Dr. Greene, Jon talks about this and the fact that there's almost two ways of looking at it. You've got a long-time mayor, Akron Mayor Don Pasqualic has been in office for more than 24 years now. And he's got, as Jon says, a great record to run on because he's done an awful lot. But then the problem with somebody who's been in office for a long time is that voters get it gets stale, and of course you've got Mike Williams, well-known name, respected candidate in terms of his service for Akron City Council, and so he has capitalized on this entire thought, thinking that his campaign theme is what, time for a change. Or is it time for a change? So the next couple of months are going to be very interesting because, as Jon says in the interview, the Democratic primary in Akron is the race for mayor because it is such a Democratic stronghold.
And Steve, the Beacon pointed out a week ago who these guys really are and laid out the background of these two guys. Is it really going to be as good of a chess match as it's laid out to be?
Well, these, as Dr. Greene said, I mean, these two guys are pro. Jerry Austin goes all the way back to managing Jesse Jackson's presidential campaign and many other campaigns in Ohio he's been involved in. Mary Boyle's Senate primary is another one. So he's a very smart guy about Ohio politics and about local politics. And Jeff Rusnak is also a skilled operative. It's interesting to see how this is playing out, at least initially. You know, the Plisquellic campaign has a mailer, and it's from the Plisquellic campaign. It says so right on the right on the mailer, and it's tough. It's negative. It goes after Mike Williams on his record, his attendance on the city council, the legislation that he's passed, which is not much, they point out. And this, to me, is a signal from the Plisquellic camp that they are not going to let Michael Williams. They're not going to give him the luxury of defining himself. Yes, everybody knows Mike Williams. It's a great name. He's been on city council. He's been elected citywide. But the task that Michael Williams has now is to redefine himself. And as a mayoral candidate, as someone who is looking ahead, what's his vision for the city, as I've said many times? Well, we don't exactly know yet. Well, into that gap, Rusnak's no dummy. I mean, into that gap, here's this effort to define Mike Williams in a negative
So
way.
how does the Williams camp respond to something like this?
Well, I think I've said from day one that my hope is that this is a positive campaign. Well, I have so far, my hopes have been dashed.
But that's just that piece of literature is not as negative a campaign as we have seen in the past.
Right. It is, Jody and I were talking earlier, I mean, it's almost certainly true. I mean, it's a factual piece. So a lot of voters, when you say negative to voters, they go, oh my God, things are negative. What they really mean is they don't like the personal attacks. That if it's factual, voters will back off and they say, well, you know, that's fair. That's you're dealing with the facts. The response, I think, I would hope from the Williams side, is to present specific ideas for change. Where do we go from here? The other part of the record about Plisquellic is, yes, you know, he's done a lot of good things. He can run on his record. But when you've been a politician for a long time, you also make people mad. And the longer you're in office, the more people you anger. It's just the nature of the business, you know. So that's the other part of this.
And I think Steve is absolutely right. For Mike Williams, if you've got a campaign piece that comes out that, as you said, kind of defines who this candidate is right now, he's got to present a vision of where he wants to take the city in the future. And what he is up against, in my estimation, is the kind of accomplishments that the mayor has to hang his hat on. And it's going to be really hard to come up with kind of the creative ideas. I mean, Don Plisquellic, for all the people he has angered, and all of the negative publicity that has come out in some respects, in terms of the long service he has given, has been an extraordinarily creative and inventive mayor in terms of projects and proposals and redefining the city. So that's really hard to come up against, and it's going to take some creativity, I think, on the Williams campaign to be able to come up against that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, well, this thought comes to mind. I mean, maybe there was a hope on the Williams side initially that Plisquellic had some negatives. The Williams name is very well known in city politics. He's got some money. He'll be able to raise a credible amount of campaign funds. Maybe initially they thought, you know, people are they want to change enough that I'll put my name out there. It's a great name. I'll say, you know, we need to change, be more civil, you know, and maybe that would be enough. My feeling is I don't think that's enough. That's been my feeling from the beginning on this, that's just not, that's going to get him in the ballpark, but it's not going to get him a home run. And so I think that's why I say I think he needs to be as specific as he can about what he wants to do for the city.
And you mentioned raising money and raising awareness, and I know, and I've talked about it even here in this broadcast, how both sides are trying to line up the surrogates. There are those in town that are key leaders that really want to stay neutral in all of this. I don't think it's going to be possible. Both sides, both camps are now pulling people to commit to their fundraisers, commit to their events, commit to their campaigns, or else.
Exactly.
And I think that is going to be something that is going to divide this community, at least over the next 90 days or so, that many had hoped we wouldn't see.
Well, and you're absolutely right about that. And the people who are the leaders in the community and who are being courted by both sides, I'm sorry, they're between a rock and a hard place because they are going to be pushed in a lot of different directions. What is also, I think, going to be essential in this campaign, and the thing that can blow it, is if the mayor has a big faux pas. if he blows up at another parking lot attendant, or if he's caught in a car running a traffic light or things like that. So I think the next 4 months for Mayor Plisqualik, he has got to dot all his I's, cross all his T's, and be as clean as he possibly can be. Because anything he does that's negative is going to be used, I think, by the Williams campaign to say, hey, this man, it's time to get rid of him.
And we'll be talking about those events as we go along. Dr. Greene's interview, all of it is on NewsNite.net. Dr. Greene also weighed in on some of the key legislation now facing our folks down in Columbus.
Individuals who value Second Amendment rights, gun owners, gun users, and so forth, are a very important constituency in the Republican Party, and a fair number of Republican leaders actually agree with them on these particular issues. And it's interesting because this is extending the legal ability to carry weapons quite a bit farther than the previous law, which was one that allowed a great deal of scope for carrying weapons. And so it'll be interesting to see how the public reacts to it. The fact that the law enforcement agencies are so critical of this extension of the law may end up influencing public opinion in the end.
Okay, concealed carry, we've talked about it ad nauseum on this show, but he mentioned this is kind of a lightning rod for a lot of folks down there.
It was a pretty interesting session. I had a chance to talk to Todd McKinney, who's a new state representative from New Franklin, defeated a Democrat, defeated Steve Dyer, formerly from the Beacon Journal. So here he is, a first-term freshman, and he's trying to stop the train on this concealed carry, looking for some compromise. And his idea was to strip out of the bill language about carrying a concealed weapon in bars. And the hope was the Senate had already passed its version with concealed carry in places that serve alcohol. So his hope was a compromise, a conference committee that would come up with some definition. In other words, his idea was, the Olive Garden, maybe okay, carry your piece in the Olive Garden. The bucket shop, the Heidi-Ho bar, maybe that's not such a good idea. So he was looking for some definition there. Difficult but not unreasonable, got steamrollered, and to me this is an example of how far this caucus, how far the Republican caucuses in the Senate and the House are prepared to go on many different pieces of legislation.
Okay, we'll add some depth to that now as we shift the conversation over to NewsNite.net.
For more NewsNite content, including extended discussions, full interviews, and the chance to speak your mind about the issues, join us online at NewsNite.net.
Again, you can watch all of the extended edition of our interviews and discussions on NewsNite.net. Steve will be back in a moment, but great to invite into the conversation his Beacon Journal counterpart, Phil Trexler. The Kelly Williams-Bollar case, the case that will never end, now goes to the parole board next week, and we joke about how it will never end, but it doesn't seem like it's ever going to, Jody. She gets to have her say in front of the parole board, so do prosecutors. Meanwhile, her father's case, a new wrinkle has come out in the Beacon Journal this week that he had a felony conviction that he may not have admitted to when dealing with the Social Security Administration. So both of them, father and daughter, facing some tough times in front of some tough people.
Oh, they are, absolutely. Although, and I want this to go away. I am so sick of this whole situation. In the case of Kelly Williams-Bollar, she's going to be going in front of the parole board, which is part of Governor Kasich's interference in a lot of respects in this particular case, feeling that she did not deserve a felony conviction for something that probably should have been tried on a civil basis rather than a criminal basis. It'll be curious to see. Now, both sides, of course, in front of the parole board can present their perspective, and I'm sure that Summit County is prepared to do theirs. But then, of course, the final decision, I think, if I'm not mistaken, rests with the governor. And through his wife, he has also indicated, she was the one who seemed to have gotten him involved in this, that he feels some sympathy toward what Kelly did in terms of trying to make sure that her children were safe, not necessarily in the schools, but in walking back and forth to the schools. So this unfortunately, is that one of those cases that will not die. Well, it's got legs. The interesting thing, though, to me was the story this week about her dad, who has frequently been an outspoken critic of everything that has happened to his daughter. And yet he's also facing some serious charges. And then, of course, in researching for the case, the prosecutor finds this felony conviction. So it'll be really curious.
It's not really good time. It's not great timing at all for his daughter. What was revealed was a 1969 conviction for marijuana trafficking. That doesn't help her case. It's really, the prosecutors are really piling on evidence that Mr. Williams has difficulties telling the truth. And, you know, a lot of her case is connected to him and vice versa. And when she goes before this board next week, I'm sure that's going to, it doesn't help her case at all. And you got to remember, too, is that Kasich had the opportunity to grant her a pardon himself, and he passed the buck. And his wife and he spoke out about it, or he spoke out about it early on in the process before the prosecutors showed their entire card. And once I think he started seeing that, he kind of pushed it over to the parole board. And it's very unusual that a case like this goes before them, and they're not a liberal board.
Are they in kind of no man's land here, because they're used to dealing with murderers?
Exactly.
And things like that.
They deal with, you know, everybody else trying to get out of prison too, but we focus usually on like death penalty cases. But it's very unusual for a case like this to go before the parole board. And as I said, they're not liberal. They're not conservative. They are very conservative. It's not an open door thing for those guys. And she's got a major hurdle to cross with them, and still, again, that Kasich will agree if in fact they recommend a pardon or clemency.
And I think Phil is absolutely right. You know, whatever happens with her father, it's almost like there's a pattern here. And did she learn to do what she did, and was she influenced by what he has done in the past in terms of being able to lie to the Social Security Administration about it, you know, and then he used a double name, or he used a second name. So there's some real concern here about how the two will influence each other, but I don't think there's any way that they will not.
And I believe she's appearing before the board, and I'll tell you what I've heard in hallways is the more that she talks, the worse her case appears. Her appearance on the Dr. Phil show and some of the interviews that she's done, she's not really helped herself a great deal.
So the parole board only makes a recommendation.
Right.
It's still up to the governor.
Right.
Are there forces that are adding pressure to him now, and did he invite that?
I just think I think he's learning more about the case. He's seeing more about the case. You know, at first blush, you know, there's a lot of sympathy that goes out for her, you know, the mother trying to get a better education for her kids. But then you peel away the layers and you see maybe she's not as sympathetic as we once believed. And I think that's what the governor is seeing, and I think that's why he pushed it off to the parole board.
Well, and I think also when this case first made national headlines, I mean, it went viral, and I think that's when he jumped in and stepped in.
And there was a lot of misinformation.
Exactly, and I think in all honesty and respect for him, he was trying to do what he felt was right. But then, as Phil said, once all of the facts became known, and it wasn't just first blush what in fact it looked like on the surface, I think he has backed off. So it'll be curious to see how in fact he deals with this.
Do you anticipate the parole board, though, will put some pressure on the prosecutor's office to show why they prosecuted this case to the level that they did?
Absolutely, and I think the prosecutors would be wise to go in there and say why they did it, because it is an unusual case, and you don't see criminal cases like this go all the way as far as it did. So yeah, there will be some discussion about that, I'm sure.
Because the criticism that so many of us heard is she's not the only one that's ever done this,
right,
regardless of her techniques.
Right, and the prosecutors will point out that she's the one who pushed the envelope and deny, and wrote letters and
wouldn't work with them, wouldn't pay what she had to do, wouldn't even admit the guilt that she had.
Right.
So what do we expect the parole board to do?
I say they say no to her.
They just
I don't think they will. I've seen that board in action, and I've seen them look at far more serious death penalty cases where there was some question about innocence or guilt, and they've said no. And it's a tough board, and I think they're pro prosecution down there, and there's a tough board to crack, and I think she's got a major hurdle to cross with those guys.
I think the one that's going to stand out to me more than any of the others as they walk through each of the reasons is when she wrote down that she was deployed with the military,
right,
which is why she couldn't do some of the things that she needed to do. I mean, some of these things are, you know, debates over where she was living, where she was spending her nights and things like that. You know, as Bob Dyer has pointed out, as Dr. Phil has pointed out, when you get to that one, aren't those the kind of things that just shoot down any credibility she has?
Absolutely,
in
and it goes to the pattern of denial, and that's why she went to trial. That's why the case went as far as it did, because she kept denying. You know, you can't stay in AMHA housing and live in Copley. You know, you can't do both, and she was trying to do both, and you can't do it.
Well, hopefully the parole board will rule quickly, whichever way they go, and then the governor will have his say, and we'll talk about it right here on NewsNite.
On NewsNite.net, we cover a broader range of topics than we can on the air in 27 minutes. Be part of the conversation on our Facebook page and at NewsNite.net.
Big week of storms as we invite Steve back into the conversation. Everybody felt at Cuyahoga Falls. Boy, I was there yesterday. tornado didn't actually touch down, but did some damage. We talk about sirens. We heard them all over the county. Not in Akron, though, during the storms this week. And some folks have a problem with that. Akron uses the sirens from the fire trucks. Good plan? Satisfactory?
I think it's satisfactory. I don't know. You know, we have them out in Montrose. You know, when the warning was issued, Fairlawn flipped the switch for its signal, and the siren went on, and I think that's sufficient notice. Everyone can hear it. Everybody rushes to the basement. You grab your iPod and your DS, and you go down to the basement and see cover. You know, Akron. That's a lot of area for Akron to cover with you know, sirens. You have them blasting all over the place, and I think that, you know, the fire trucks. I think it's sufficient.
Yeah, this has been discussed for years. I mean, Akron's been lucky. We've had tornadoes. I think the last major one was out in Newton Falls in the 80s, maybe. Right. But Akron doesn't seem to be, you know, prone to this. So we've just gotten by with this system. It seems to work okay.
All right. Well, a few people brought it up this week, but everybody kind of endured the storms. A few others say they've seen wolves and coyotes near the Akron Zoo. We've even seen a few pictures of them. An off-duty Akron police officer took one. Might be wolves, might be coyotes, might be a hybrid. I'm getting emails from people all over the place saying, I know exactly what it is, but nobody seems to catch these guys.
Yeah.
What do you make of this in the city?
It's kind of like Bigfoot, you know, if you think about it. You know, you're getting these photos and whatnot, but, you know, we're not making any captures here. I think, you know, the big concern is, of course, is with your pets. You know, those are the coyotes go after the family pooch or the family cat, and those are the ones that are most vulnerable. But it's certainly a safety concern that we really need to pay attention to.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm buying the wolf thing. I mean, they're pretty substantial animals. I've seen a coyote early in the morning in the Cuyahoga Valley. They're definitely out there. They tend to kind of slink along.
What do they look like in comparison to a dog, to those that have never seen one?
They're a little larger than a dog, most dogs anyway, and they kind of slink along. Their tail is low. They're pretty secretive little creatures, but what I'm saying is, you know, we have this park nearby, the Cuyahoga Valley Park, and other parks that are, you know, full of animals. I mean, deer and now coyotes, and so you're talking about, yes, it's an urban neighborhood, but there are parts of it that are heavily wooded. It's, you know, certainly possible that one of them has worked its way. The deer certainly do. They're everywhere. They work their way up through the valley and into residential areas all the time. So,
yeah, nobody complains about the deer too much.
I do. I hate them. They eat everything in sight. They eat hosta. They eat everything.
Well, then get your concealed carry and you'll be fine.
Well, you know, you get on the lookout for the coyotes, you get on the lookout for the wolves, whatever they are. It just kind of adds a little flavor. Now news this week that the Beacon Journal reported that a possible bear, evidence of a bear being here in Summit County. I forget which kind of bear, but bear, you say bear, it gets people's attention.
Yeah.
This was a black bear, and they think it was hibernating in a park in northern Summit County. Liberty Park, I think, was the name of the park. And they took photographs. This has been a running joke with runners in the valley. You know, I don't have to run faster than the bear. I just have to run faster than you. But I guess these are, again, secretive. You know, they're not confrontational creatures, and the Park Service advises that if you do encounter the black bear, just back off slowly. You don't want to turn around and run. You want to back off slowly and, you know, be facing the bear.
Yeah,
but
is it reasonable to think that if there was one bear, that there was only one?
Well, that's the
No,
fear.
there's probably, I mean, it probably has a mom or dad somewhere, I bet. And I think it's more evidence about how slow this Newsweek was that we weren't about his lineage. But yeah, I mean, certainly if there's one, there's going to be more. And yeah, I mean, we're just not, you know, we're urban folks. We're not used to seeing, you know, wolves or coyotes or bears.
But we're heading into a time now in late spring, early summer, where people are going to get out. Families are going to want to go to the Cuyahoga Valley National Park and use these things. Coyotes, wolves, and bears, oh my, are these the kind of things that are going to stop people from going or concern them when they go?
I don't think so. I mean, the sightings that I've had of most wildlife, including deer, are early in the morning when there's not many people around. Once you get a lot of traffic, you know, people, and during the daylight hours, it's pretty rare to
And when was the last time you read about or listened about someone being attacked by a bear or being attacked by a coyote? You know, it just doesn't happen.
Yeah, but if it happens once, that's one too
One,
many.
I know, but if we can save one,
Yeah,
right?
sure.
I know.
My favorite story is the lady up in northern Summit County who hit a deer with a shovel that was eating
Yeah,
her garden,
in
and she
Euclid.
got she got charged with animal cruelty for
whacking a
for
deer.
whacking a deer on the head. It was eating her garden. So there you go.
Actually, a victim, is the deer going to testify?
I don't know.
I don't see. Hey, we got about a minute and a half left, and I just want to touch real quickly on LeBron James making it to the NBA Finals, which is what he said was his goal all along. You know, people have rooted against him. People have rooted for him. I think more people have rooted against him in Northeast Ohio. But now that he's here and it's Akron, Ohio, on the international spotlight, how do you think people will respond these next couple of
I'll tell you,
weeks?
he lit it up last night. You know, they were down 13 points with about 3 minutes to go, and he and Dwayne Wade really took control of that game. I'll tell you, they're peaking, and the Heat look tough, and it's going to be a rematch again with the Mavericks, who they beat in the championship series. But I know there's a lot of folks who are rooting against them, but it might be all for nothing because that's a strong-looking team, and you know, it's. As much as we hate to say it, I mean, they look like they're destined to win the first of several NBA titles.
Yeah, I think the hard feelings are fading. I mean, it's going to take a while, but it's exciting to watch, and he's the hometown. So I think over time, you know, he's still the hometown guy, like you're saying. And
he'll always be booed at the Q.
Yeah.
I mean, he'll always be booed, and there's still going to be a faction that don't like him, but he still has his supporters in Akron.
sure, and he's done. I mean, as we've said many times, he's done a lot of good things for the city, and given the city good publicity. So he's certainly that gives him a reservoir of
Well,
goodwill.
he's from the Akron area. People are going to want him to be successful wherever he goes.
Sure.
But sports fans, that's a lot to get over.
Sports fans don't want him to win the title, and unfortunately, it's looking bad. And
Well, we'll talk about that in the coming weeks. Great conversation this
looking
week.
good.
Phil, Steve, and Jody, thanks as well. And thanks to having you along. We'll see you next Friday for Newsnight. Good night.